Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have with us one of the greatest musicians of all time. He's been on the scene for over 50 years and has worked with many greats from Frank Zappa to Genesis, Weather Report, Phil Collins, and Carlos Santana, to name a few. He is a drummer, educator, and producer. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. Chester Thompson. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. Glad to be here.
Man, it's so good to have you on. Now, Chester, like I said at the top of the show, you've been on the scene for, oh gosh, quite a while. And you've worked with countless musicians. A lot of them happen to be my favorite. But I'm curious to know a little bit more about your background, your humble beginnings, and how all this began. I understand that you are from Baltimore, Maryland.
Yep, from Baltimore.
Okay, which is about 15, 20 minutes from me. It's relatively close, but tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in music and playing drums.
Oh, well, I just had to play drums. I realized that. I thought it happened maybe around sort of fifth grade. Well, I guess it happened before that. That was the first time I actually got to have sticks in my hand, instruments in the classroom. My mother gave me a letter that I wrote in fourth grade, apparently. And it was one of those, what you gonna do when you grow up?
Yeah.
And I had no memory of it whatsoever, but it outlined my whole career.
Mm.
Yeah, it really messed me up when I read it, actually. I've now lost it, which is probably just as well, but yeah, it was really pretty stunning because I had no idea that it was that clear that early.
Yeah.
I was taking lessons from a friend of one of my brothers played drums, and he had chosen to play jazz. He didn't want to, he had done the other stuff and didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
I was taking lessons with him, which consisted of, playing along with records and him guiding me through it. So playing along with Miles Davis and Cannonball Adderley and, eventually Coltrane and he taught me, he taught me some really stuff that sticks with me today, stuff that I teach even.
Yeah,
One of the most important things was that when they start soloing, keep singing the song, learn the song, keep singing the song in your head so you don't get lost,
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Chester, during that time period, I guess you were listening to a lot of drummers. I believe Elvin Jones and Tony Williams were two big influences on you?
Max was the first big influence. Listened to a lot of Max Roach. Listened to quite a bit of Art Blakey as well. And eventually, Elvin and then Tony. They were major influences. I guess I hit the club scene around 13, started playing bars. I was actually at his house for a lesson one day. Somebody called him for a soul music gig, is what it was back in the day before it became all the other things it became.
Yeah.
And he wasn't interested because, like I say, he had chosen to play jazz and was part of a good group. And he was about to hang up. He said, "Well, hold on, I think I got a drummer for you." So he turns around and asks me if I want a gig. So I'm 13 at the time, don't actually even have a drum set, I'd come every day. And of course I want a gig, So he set it up. They said, well, if he's 13, we got to hear him first. So he loaned me his drum set. We went over and did an audition. And they liked the way I played. So I got the gig, and I had one uncle that had enough credit to get a used drum set on credit. So we went straight down to the music store the next day and got me a drum set.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you about that. Now, I read somewhere that when you were young, you were playing in clubs and you actually took an eyebrow liner and did a mustache on you so you could look older.
Tried that once. At the end of the gig, it was really weird because it was the first. Obviously Baltimore is just as segregated as it is now. So this was like the first time playing in the suburbs.
Yeah.
White club. So I thought we didn't know if it was going to be, if I was going to get away with being up there or not. The lady that was managing that night, she was really sweet. She was kind of laughing when we were packing up. She says, oh yeah, you guys sounded really good. And by the way, your mustache is running, because I'm in there sweating away.
Right. Oh man, that's funny. That's funny. So, you're in your teens, man, you're playing, doing your thing. Now, didn't you like go to school or something like that and do some teaching in your early 20s, or you did some type of a stint for like a summer or for a short time?
No, not at all. Basically, all what I did was straight out of high school, I went on the road,
Okay.
a bunch of cover bands and stuff. We played
Yeah.
all over the South, playing basically white clubs in the South, playing
Interesting. Okay.
the top 10 of the day.
Wow. Now I understand that you hooked up with Benny King. You actually, that was one of your early gigs. You played with the Benny King.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was well, I was playing with a guitar player in Baltimore, a guy named O'Donnell Levy.
Okay.
Him and I grew up together basically, and we must have been in at least 10 bands together at different times.
Right.
And we were playing together. Let's see, we did it. He ended up with an album deal, and we went up to New York to record. As it turned out, the bass player on the gig was Benny King's music director.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was very surprised to get a call from him a few weeks later saying that, Benny had some dates and asking when, would I be interested in coming and doing them. So I just basically drove up to New York. It wasn't a long thing. It was only a couple of weeks in Canada back in the days when everybody played a week in every club, it wasn't one-nighters in those days.
Yeah.
And man, it was an amazing experience. He was one of the nicest gentlemen that I ever worked with in my life, actually. The guy was a real sweetheart, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you also play, what was it Jack McDuff?
Well, basically the end of that, let's see, straight out of high school, went on the road.
Yeah.
But at the end of that, O'Donnell and I were playing with a band that, make a long story short, it was kind of a cover thing. We were doing a 6-week run in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the jazz workshop was walking distance from where we were, and so during those days, the jazz workshop actually had a jam session on Sundays, and the actual group, whoever was playing it, would host the jam session, which I mean you'd never see that now.
Right.
So we went down there one Sunday and sat in with McDuff, O'Donnell, Butch. He ended up leaving the next week. McDuff offered the gig. So about 2-3 weeks after that, I got a call that he was offering me the gig. He had heard me play as well, and he needed a drummer at that point. And
Wow.
so I kind of gave my notice. We found somebody else to come in and finish out the gig. I mean, it was pretty low key stuff, but so yeah, we ended up both on the road with McDuff. I stayed with him about a year.
Oh, wow.
And after that, I actually lived in Boston for about 6 months, playing with a killer keyboard player from Baltimore named Webster Lewis.
Okay.
Webster had been living up there, and when he went up to do his master's degree, he went to Berkeley, didn't like it, and ended up doing it at New England Conservatory.
Interesting.
But I
Now,
stayed
Chester,
with him
sorry, continue.
about 6 months. After that, I ended up going back to Baltimore and decided to go back to school.
Ah, okay. Okay, that's what I was reading. Now, how did you hook up with Frank Zappa, man? How did you get that gig to work with him?
It was a Baltimore connection, actually. That ties directly into the gig that led to Zappa.
Wow.
Well, there used to be some concert promoters called Premier Attractions. In those days, they booked all of the Civic Center gigs, all the same stuff. They decided to go into management. And so they brought in this guy named Marty Perellis, who I guess was dabbling in music at the time. His dad owned a chain of small department stores around town.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was in charge of managing. It was actually 2 groups, so he was kind of handling these 2 groups. And I guess he checked around on who to get, and O'Donnell, Butch and I got called. We weren't doing that. And so after we left from Willie McDuff, he actually managed to combine those 2 groups and got them as far as a Motown contract.
Uh-huh.
And everybody ended up moving to LA. Soon after that, he ended up as Zappa's tour manager.
Oh, okay.
And so I guess at some point, Frank had mentioned, I don't know if he was talking to him or just he was there, but Frank mentioned that he was thinking of adding a second drummer. The band had gotten so perfect, he felt like it had gotten sterile. So he had said he'd wanted to add another drummer with more of a street feel, as he called it, but somebody that could learn the book. Because I mean, that was some really difficult music.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
basically, the punchline is that I've been going to this community college in Baltimore. I guess it's changed names up on Liberty. And they at that time they had a killer music department, believe it or not. Part of the faculty from Peabody had defected and gone over to there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they wanted to teach more, without the snobbery and stuff.
Right.
So, which was a great, conservatory instruction for $200 a month,
Yeah, yeah.
So long story short, and I've completed my 2 years, got my associate thing. Well, graduation was supposed to be that Sunday, and my mom was really excited. This is around September. Uh, it was a late graduation. So two things happened. One, I was supposed to graduate. I got the call on a Friday, and Marty Perellis is saying, hey, how'd you like to play with Frank Zappa, who I had heard when I stayed in Boston. I was hanging out with some guys that was playing some of his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, yeah, sure. So the only catch is you got to be on a plane Sunday because you got to be at rehearsal Monday morning to audition. And the other thing was that because I was about to transfer to University of Maryland, I decided to try and save some money from not knowing how much I could get out and do gigs if I'm down there on campus.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I did to save money was applied for a school bus driving gig.
Okay.
And I love driving the bus, so driving around. And I think earlier that day, that Friday, because they would take me out on these drives so I know how to handle the bus.
Right.
So one day, the guy takes me out to Reisterstown. I had never been there in my life, had no idea where I was. And it's like, drive here, drive there, drive there. And at the end of it, the guy said, well, this is your route. You pick the kids up Monday morning. And I'm terrified because I really wasn't paying attention. I'm just like, okay, I'll turn here, turn there,
Right.
It was going to be bad. And this would have been in 73. Answering machines were not commonplace yet.
Right.
So I had to think, okay, so I'm supposed to be driving this bus Monday morning, or I can have an audition with Frank Zappa. Obviously that, didn't take a lot of thinking about. My mom was a little disappointed about the graduation. It's like, well, why don't you go with me to the airport, because I'm gonna get this gig. And let's call that my graduation. That's why I'm going to school,
Right.
I mean, I had no idea what I was in for. Fortunately, I did get the gig, but I don't know how those kids got to school Monday morning, man.
I'm sure it worked out somehow. I was going to ask you, Chester, what was your perception? I mean, what was like rehearsal like working with him? Because I read somewhere like it was like draining. I mean, you guys would rehearse, I heard like 40 hours a week before like a concert tour or something like that. I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like. But what was your perception, once you got in the band and you're like, wow, I'm working with Frank Zappa? Was this like, wow, this is more difficult than what I thought it was going to be? Or, I mean, what was the experience like for you?
I think I was more impressed that I was working with George Duke, because he was in the band at the time, which I didn't know of George Duke, but I was taken with him,
Right.
And he just kind of welcomed me into his family out there because I didn't know anybody out there,
Right.
So, it was my introduction to 40-hour-a-week rehearsals. The thing is, at that level in the rock world, that is the norm. I mean,
wow.
With Genesis, every Genesis tour, we did 40 hours a week rehearsals. I mean, so with Zappa, it was a month. We did 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Zappa, your brain would hurt, your brain would sweat when you come out of his rehearsals. We had a lunch break, but there was not a lot of time wasted. I mean, but Frank was a brilliant teacher.
Yeah.
Those bands all sounded that way because he knew how to get stuff out of you that you didn't know you could do, I mean, my routine, that first month of rehearsals, we rehearsed from 11 to 7. And the guy who became the saxophone player and lead singer, Napoleon Murphy Brock, we stayed in the same motel near the rehearsal hall. We'd get up, go get breakfast, going up to rehearsal, come back, have dinner, stop and get dinner after rehearsal, go back to the hotel, watch a little TV, go to bed, wake up 2 or 3 in the morning, practice for 2 hours, go back to sleep, get up, go to breakfast, and go to rehearsal. Well, that's the only way I could learn that music, the only way I could absorb it, you know. The summer before that summer before that audition, I guess it was it the spring semester or summer? I guess it was spring semester. I'd heard about a big band class out at Towson.
Mm.
And so I did that, and it was all odd time signatures. It was Hank Levy, who actually wrote quite a few Don Ellis charts and wrote quite a few charts for Woody Herman when he had the Thundering Herd.
Yeah.
Odd time stuff. And that big band, that class was him trying out those tunes before he sent them out.
Okay.
So it was kind of a little introduction to the whole world of odd times and all of that.
Yeah.
But it was pretty elementary compared to what Frank was doing.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, you worked with Zappa for a couple of years, and then you hooked up with Weather Report. And I understand your bass player, the great Alphonso Johnson, was instrumental in getting you in that band. Tell us about that, man. I mean, working with Joe Zawinul and Wayne Shorter. I mean, wow. And
Well,
I got, you know.
the hookup with Alfonso goes back to that same thing in Boston.
Did he turn you on to Zappa?
No, not at all.
Okay.
We were both, these two bands that had formed in Baltimore that this guy with Marty was managing.
Right.
He played in the other band.
Okay.
So we just jammed every chance we got, man. We just jammed all the time. Every time we got a chance to play, we went for it. So we got to be really good friends and stayed in touch. So by the time, so he was already in LA playing with the Weather Report. As a matter of fact, he called me the night before he got the Weather Report gig. He was playing with Chuck Mangione.
Ah, okay.
He called me from the gig in New York, said, guess what? I'm leaving in the morning to go join Weather Report. He was pretty excited.
Wow.
And so I'd been with Frank for a couple of years. Frank had canceled a tour. And so all of a sudden I'm there with nothing to do. We've been on the road so much, I didn't really know anybody there. So I didn't really have any network for work or anything. Alfonso was saying, man, the guys are in town. Why don't you come on down and jam with the guys? And as we were talking, he mentioned, man, we went through so many drummers last year. It felt like maybe 10 guys. I think he was exaggerating, but I said, well, man, I'm not that fond of auditioning. He said, oh, no, it's not an audition. Come jam with the guys,
Yeah.
So I went down. Of course, there's another drummer there, so we both got our kits there. We just take turns playing with the guys. And
Right.
they, amazing drummer, but they ended up, asking if I would do the tour. And with the tour being canceled, we started rehearsing immediately the next week. And Zappa's music was really incredible, and I learned a lot. But Weather Report was a lot closer to home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I immediately let Frank know that I was doing that. And, he was fine about it. I don't think he was even that surprised, because he knew my roots were more jazz,
Right. Now, you guys, I guess Weather Report had finished their recording Tail Spinning, and
Right.
you were on the Black Market recording, which is one of my favorites. And I think not long around the same time, Jaco Pastorius, the great bassist, came into that band. Man, what was it like? What was your perception of Jaco?
Okay, let me phrase my words carefully. Well, I've been on the road for a year with Alfonso, and him and
Right.
I, even to this day, we did his first tour about 3 years ago in South America. And Alfonso and I have a thing where we don't have to think or talk, we just lock.
Yeah.
So after a year of on the road with that band, playing with him as well, they had a little bit of I guess, Weather Report changed management right in the middle of all of that. They ended up going with the same people that managed Earth, Wind, and Fire. So we actually did a tour opening for Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Wow.
We played our thing while people were coming in to see Earth, Wind, and Fire, basically.
Yeah.
But they had been promising Alfonso partner membership in the band. Because we were hired guns, basically. The band is Joe and Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
And after 3 years of being with them, the new managers are saying no way, And in the meantime, which I didn't even know, Alfonso had gotten his own record deal with Columbia. So during the recording of Black Market, he, when they made it, when he knew for sure he was never going to be in the band, he quit. So
Yeah.
we were on a Christmas break. I was still had gone back to Baltimore for Christmas, and so when I got back, I called up Wayne asking what's going on, when are we going back in the studio? And Wayne called me back and left a message on my answering machine. I wasn't at home, saying, well, we are going back in, but you don't need to show up. I thought, well, that was a little strange. So I called Joe, said, Joe, what's going on here? And Joe was like, well, didn't you quit? No, why do you think I quit? Well, Alfonso quit. I thought you and Alfonso were forming another band, which is what they did. They quit Miles and Cannonball to form Weather Report.
Right.
And we were as close as they were, so they just kind of assumed we were forming a new band.
Right.
And it's like, well, I said, so what's up? Am I in the band or am I out or what? It's like, well, no, if you didn't quit, you're in the band. So Jocko was in, but in the meantime, they had asked Jocko who he wanted to play with, and he had said no to Michael Walden.
Okay.
Which is why he's on 1.5 cuts of Black Market. They gave him the credit for the song Black Market.
Yeah.
But they get a cut in the middle. The first half is me.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah. The next time you hear Black Market, you'll notice when it switches to the kind of swing field in the middle, it's a whole different reverb sound, different drum sound. I mean, it's very obvious when you know it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they weren't, he didn't really mesh with the band that well. So we start rehearsing. As fantastic as Jocko is, he doesn't have like that natural triplet bass feel, that true funk thing.
Yeah.
If it's tight 16ths, you can't beat him, And so all of the tunes had to take on a different feel. So, it was confusing because the managers had actually called me and saying how much they had said to him. They were really, how much I really nailed it on the album. They really loved what I played, which was very flattering,
Yeah, man, that was a great album, Chester.
But to be told in rehearsals, well, that ain't the right feel. It's like, but I thought that was, I was too naive to realize that Jocko couldn't go there. And they were pretty committed to Jocko at that point.
Right. Yeah.
So the vibe went downhill fast. It was really bad.
Oh, man, that's unfortunate. Wow.
Well, it was time,
Because that was,
for the band's sake, that was the very best move they could have made to have Jocko in there. And Alex was playing percussion, so he moved over to drums.
Yeah. Alex Acuna, yeah. Yeah, that was a great recording. Cannonball and Barbary Coast, and yeah, that was a great recording. I always loved the photo of all of you guys, sitting down on the floor at that little table with the fruit and stuff, the bowl of fruit and stuff. I said that's a great photo. And also, I think not long after that, Alfonso went on to go with that group with George Duke, John Schofield, and Billy Cobham.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Duke Cobham thing. Right.
Right. So after Weather Report, didn't you do some type of thing with the Wiz, like some type of stage production or something?
Yeah, it was the LA company of the Wiz. The New York company was still running. And so I'd gotten an audition with them. I'd gotten recommended for an audition from actually Roy McCurdy had recommended me.
Okay.
Your music director knew Roy, and Roy and I had become friends. And Roy was, I guess he was playing with Nancy Wilson at that time. And Roy had been the one playing with Cannonball, with Mercy Mercy and all that stuff, And so basically, it didn't work out for me to do it. At that point, I ended up picking it up in San Francisco. In the meantime, I toured with
Point Sisters?
Yeah, I did that for a while.
Yeah. What was that like, man?
Oh, they were phenomenal, man. This is before they had hits. Well, they had done Yes You Can, but if you remember, I don't know how old you are, but if you remember back in those days, they were doing all Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross stuff.
Wow. It's about the 70s. Okay.
Oh man, they were incredible.
So you actually thought they were better before they became commercial and hit it big?
Well, they were always good, but
Yeah.
they sang some really challenging. It was like some of those Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross arrangements.
Mm. Wow.
And so it was a really good rhythm section. They brought in big band on some of the gigs. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a dream gig.
Oh, wow. Wow. How long did you do that for, Chester?
We just did one. I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks in Japan, if that. And I did a handful of gigs with them back in the States.
Okay.
And then this audition thing came up. I'd never done theater, and it was like, and I always wanted to do something like that. And the Wiz was, I mean, it's a drummer show.
Now, you also hooked up and jammed with Carlos Santana for a little bit. How did that whole thing come about?
Okay, so I'm in San Francisco with the Wiz,
Mm-hmm.
and the other sidebar on the Wiz, Dee Dee Bridgewater was doing it, and basically most of the original cast, except for Dorothy, except for oh goodness, I can see her face and can't call her name. Became a big R&B star after the Wiz.
I know who you're talking about.
Okay, I'm sure it'll be in the other conversation. So anyway, so Dee Dee leaves, and they bring in this other singer, Roz Clark. We became buddies.
Jennifer Holliday.
No, not at all. Much.
I thought it was Jennifer Holliday.
No, that was Dreamgirls.
Oh, that's right.
Years later.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It'll probably come to us later, Chester.
Tiny little bitty thing. Incredible singer though. Oh my goodness. And she actually bought the rights to the Wiz. Oh man.
Is it Stephanie Mills?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Well, she was still doing. She's the only one that didn't come to L.A.
Okay.
I was basically got out of Chicago. I got out of New York for a while.
Yeah.
So anyway, the lady Roz Clark that replaced Dee Dee is my wife of 42 years.
Oh wow, that's incredible, man.
Yes, these little circles just keep interlocking.
Yeah.
So yeah, while I was there, it was interesting because the show was going to go to Chicago, and my contract hadn't showed up yet. I later found out that it's tricky when you're touring with musicians with a show like that, because every union has its rules about how many people have to be in the pit.
Yeah.
With in San Francisco, the book was won over what their requirement was, so there was no issue with me being there.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, it was one under that, so my being that meant some Chicago guy didn't work, and they weren't going to pay 2 people for the chair. So
right.
So they kept hemming and hawing about my contract, and I thought, okay, this is getting weird. I can feel it coming. In the meantime, Carlos calls up. He knew me from Weather Report. We had met on a few occasions, and asked would I be interested in band doing the gig, and would I learn like 3 of the tunes and come down. So I did. Went down there, and he liked my playing, and he said, well, go and talk to Bill Graham and work out the money. And so Bill Graham proceeded to offer me quite a bit less than I was making. And it's like, why would I do that? And
right.
He kept trying to disguise it and say, well, what if we do it this way? Or what if we do it that way? But it's going to always only be that same thing.
Right.
Look it up at the end of the year, we'll do this, we'll do that. And I just didn't feel good about it. I left. And when I left his office, I felt like I was going to throw up, to be honest. I don't like talking about money.
Right.
How can you argue for yourself? It's like, so anyway, Marty Perellis again, the one that got me by the way, Marty's from Baltimore, and Zappa was from Baltimore. So I had this whole in Baltimore thing. But then Marty and I stayed in touch. I checked with him to see if him and his wife wanted to come up and see the show, which they did up to San Francisco. And he said, oh yeah, by the way, if you ever need somebody to negotiate something for you, man, I'll be glad to do it. And it's like, I said, man, I could have used you last week trying to talk to Bill Graham. It's like, And so maybe a few days after that, I get this, call from London. And it's like, this is Phil Collins. Are you interested in joining Genesis?
Wow. Amazing, man.
So the next day, the manager calls up. I mean, Phil's already said, I played some of the Zappa stuff you recorded with some of the guys and some other things you recorded, and they're fine with it, you know.
Oh, that's great.
And plus, Phil came to what turned out to be the last gig I ever did with Weather Report, which was in London. So he had come to that gig, you know.
Oh, wow.
So the manager calls the next day. He says, like, of course you have to have an audition. We got to make sure it's going to lock with the band. And right after, they says, so tell me, how much would you like to make for the gig? And man, it was my happiest moment to say, well, talk to this guy. He'll tell you how much he'll work that out.
Right.
And it was, it was something I would have never had the nerve to ask for, even, you know. And they were very generous, really sweet people to work with, actually. You know?
Man, that's great. That's great. Yeah, like I said, your time with them was just awesome. I was watching something with you and Phil doing this drum battle, and both of you guys were just going for it. I mean, it was excellent, you know, the two of you, man. And yeah, man, and of course, you know, he went on to have, you know, the success that he did after, you know, Genesis had a big pop career. And of course, after Genesis, you went on to work with him as well. But I wanted to ask you something. I guess years later.
Let me correct you. That's not after Genesis. One year Genesis tour, 1 year Phil tour.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking about Phil. Yeah, like I guess maybe more like in the '80s. But yeah. You're right.
It wasn't. He didn't leave until the '90s, actually.
The '90s. Okay. Now, was Peter Gabriel there when you were there?
No. Well, the thing that happened is, you see, when Peter left, they kept auditioning singers and they found no one they liked. And Phil had always sang the harmonies, you know, in the background parts with Peter.
Okay.
He knew all the songs.
Yeah.
They didn't find a singer in time for the recording session, so he sang. So then they were auditioning singers again, and they didn't find anybody they liked for the tour. So that first tour, him and Bill Bruford were friends, grew up in the same neighborhood or whatever. And he called Bill, and Bill jumped in and did the first tour.
Mm.
And, you know, Pete and Phil, basically, Phil's mom ran what they call an art school, basically a school for the performing arts.
Yeah.
And that's where Phil went to school. So, and by the time he was 16, he had a really thriving acting career doing West End, which is the equivalent of Broadway.
Yeah.
So being out front wasn't a big stretch for him. Yeah.
Wow. I was just thinking about Phil Collins and just the career that he's had. And I'm sure he was a big fan of Earth, Wind, and Fire, too, because he ended up getting their horns, that horn section. I remember Maurice White said in an interview, he said, man, I had to make an appointment to even talk to my own horn section, you know? But yeah, that was great stuff. Now, later on, didn't you were going to do something again with Frank Zappa? I think he called you, or was like toward the end of his career, something that you turned it down or didn't do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, the period that I worked with Frank was actually really happy. And the music was really funny. It was hilarious stuff, very satirical.
Yeah.
And he'd go to the edge a little bit, but he never went over the edge, really. In later years, he got real dark. The stuff he was doing was really dark. And especially when he, you know, found out he had cancer, he was pretty bitter. And, you know, he's like a real self-made kind of guy, you know, and wanted no parts of religion or anything like that.
Mm.
By then I'd become a Christian and was, you know, very committed to it. And the music, I went over his house to check out the music he wanted to do on the tour. And it was so anti God, anti Christ,
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it.
I understand and respect that, man. Yeah, definitely. Was that sort of like your last interaction with them?
Pretty much. You know, I tried to get Dennis on the gig, actually. And he was kind of freaking out with, you know, I said, well, he plays with P-Funk, but the guy can play anything. It's like, you know, I'm telling you, he's going to be like the biggest thing out. You really want to check this guy out. And I guess Dennis was telling me, I guess they did contact him eventually. You know, so, I mean, because even with the reading, even with that, and I said he doesn't read, but believe me, that ain't going to be an issue, you know.
Right.
And, I mean, because those charts were they were nightmare charts, but, you know, it's really interesting because sometimes, like, Dennis is almost better off because a lot of times you get straight to the music because you gotta, you know, and there's like this weird transition you gotta make when you learn something on the chart, and you gotta transition to it because Frank wouldn't let you take music on stage.
Yeah.
When you had to memorize everything before the, you know, before the tour. Yeah,
I know, man, that's crazy. I know eventually he got Vinny Colaiuta on the drums. Vinny
well,
played with him for a while too.
that was much later.
Yeah.
Let's see, Terry Bozzio came right after me.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know if Wackerman was before Vinny, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, I got to hear him. I got to hear Vinny with him. We were all on a festival together in Europe when I was with Genesis.
Yeah.
The guy was unbelievable, man. You know.
Yeah. He's a great drummer. Great drummer. Now I was going to ask you. You also toured with the Bee Gees. Tell me about that, man.
Okay. I met some manager guy that I knew in LA. I had played for I recorded for some of the artists. You know, he had several jazz artists, but he also had the Bee Gees, which unknown to me. So he actually called up and asked, well, yeah, he called up and asked, man, would you consider doing a tour of the Bee Gees? You know, they need somebody that's more than just a drummer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously those songs from the one thing I knew about was great stuff. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
why not, you know. So I did that. Went down to Miami, rehearsed with them, and man, those guys had so many songs, so much music, and their new album that they were putting out was great, but they couldn't get played in the U.S.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let them off of that disco thing, you know.
Right. Right.
We got to Europe, man, they packed out arenas all over the place. Everybody knew every song on all the post-disco music and stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, Barry Gibbs might be the most professional and nicest person I ever worked with.
Wow.
I mean, the guy was he was just a real gentleman. Knew exactly what he wanted in every case. And so one night we were playing, and I just started taking some liberties. You know, I thought, this might not be cool. And so I checked with Barry. He said, "Oh no, man, do that, more of that. You know, just I
Mm.
want you to play, go for it." So it was, you know.
That's great, man. Hey, what was it like working with Freddie Hubbard? You played with him too.
Yeah,
One of my favorite trumpeters, man.
oh man, oh goodness, unbelievable player. I never really toured with him. We just did a bunch of stuff around LA. I did that Love Connection album with him.
Mm-hmm.
And some dates came up. There was this one place I used to play with my band at the time, and Freddie used to like playing there too. It was called Pasquale's.
Okay.
And it was right on the beach, overlooking, literally over the beach in Malibu. And it was just the best vibe, period. I mean, what a great gig.
Mm.
So I played a bunch down there with Freddie. Freddie, amazing player. He was a little self-destructive. I'll leave it at that, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I didn't end up touring with him. It came up, and it was like I didn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, it was a great experience. Oh my goodness! And Billy Child was playing piano. You know?
Yeah. Billy's a great player.
Oh man, yeah, Billy's amazing. And Billy and I had history because that summer after Weather Report, between Weather Report and Pointer Sisters and all of that, there was a funky little club in Venice called the Comeback Inn.
Mm.
And we played down there every weekend. There was a band, Larry Klein, who went on to become this big shot producer, you know, great bass player when he was like a kid. He was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
The piano chair would rotate. It was between Patrice Rushen, George Cables, Billy Child. It was just, Mulgrew Miller even, you know.
The late Mulgrew Miller, yeah, great pianist.
I mean, every week it'd be one of them playing, and man, we just all got to be friends, and they let us play anything we wanted to play, and we just went for it, you know.
That's awesome, man. Now, Chester, I wanted to ask you about the work that you do. You're also an educator, and you taught. Now, I'm not sure if you're still teaching was it Belmont University?
I left
A couple years ago.
the spring semester of 2018. I
Okay.
started in '98. That's because my son was going there. The guy who was teaching drums left to go work on another degree.
Yeah.
I wasn't a real fan of what he was teaching my son to begin with, and neither was my son. So I'd always wanted to teach him everything I knew, but I don't know if you got any kids, but it's a little weird to try to do lessons with your kid, you know?
Oh, I understand, man. Sure. I have a daughter. I mean, I can relate. But I was just saying, is teaching
But
something that you enjoy, Chester?
I had no idea at the time. I
Yeah.
had no idea. I mean, people would ask, it's like, I don't teach. You know? A couple of times I'd show somebody a couple of things, and that's enough of that. I don't want to be committed to your career or whatever.
Right.
And so we'll get in there with my son, and then there's all these other kids. And man, I absolutely fell in love with it.
Really?
Oh man, it keeps you in the woodshed.
Yeah.
You gotta stay on it, man. And it's like, I was there for 20 years. It was you know, I was free to leave for a tour, you know, if I need to go out for a semester and do a tour, that wasn't a problem. I still had my spot when I got back, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a feather in their cap because they you know, they promote that's what they use, that kind of thing to draw students, you know. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. I actually kind of miss it right now.
Oh.
I'm finally set up to teach online, but it ain't the same, you know.
I was about to ask you about that. Yeah, a lot of musicians are doing that. I had Billy Cobham. He still lives in Switzerland. I had him on the show about a month ago, and he was just talking about the COVID-19 and all, and you know how they have to work around it. And he's getting a bunch of drummers and stuff together to do some type of a project, I guess, in the fall.
Oh, good.
But yeah. So yeah, everybody's doing it. Now I wanted to ask you, man, what do you listen to when you're just home, relaxing, Chester, taking it easy, or you may be home with your wife, maybe just taking it easy. What type of music do you listen to? What artists do you play? I mean, is it stuff from the past, or you listen to current stuff, or any musicians out there that you're checking out right now and saying, you know what, that guy's got a lot of talent. I got my eye on him.
Man, my listening is all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, mostly I'm working. I had a band in LA. They were my first band, you know, and we started talking when this thing was going on. They got a great studio. So we started talking when this thing first shutting down. It's like, why don't I send you guys some drum tracks? And, you know, y'all just do something with it. So I think we got 8 tunes done now.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've been really digging into that. You know, a lot of my listening, unfortunately, is work.
Yeah.
But you know, I always like to stay up on Brazilian stuff. I just love Brazilian music. I've been down there a couple of times, and just the rhythms and the harmonies, they're so far beyond beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is, man. I love it too. It's funny you brought that up. Maurice White of Earth, Wind and Fire was influenced by Brazil. He took a trip to Brazil, had the Brazil bug in him. He came back and wrote the All in All album. That was what that whole thing was about. So yeah, I can definitely dig it. And I dig you too, man. Like I said, you're just a wonderful cat. Love your music and just the different bands that you played with over the years. And you're truly an inspiration. I'm about to close out the show. Hang on. Well, you've heard it from the great Chester Thompson. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.